Are you trying to figure out what flavor of neurospicy you are? In this video, I'm going to talk about the differences and similarities between ADHD and autism. I'm going to tell you what it's like to have both, and if you stick around to the end, I've got some tips and tricks to help you thrive. So let's get started. ADHD and autism overlap a lot. So let's begin with a list of symptoms. The symptoms for ADHD are inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity, forgetfulness, emotional dysregulation, sensory sensitivities, and executive dysfunction. The symptoms for autism are rigidity, repetitive behaviors like stimming, meltdowns, social communication issues, sensory sensitivities, and executive dysfunction. The diagnostic criteria doesn't actually use all of these symptoms. Diagnosis is focused on a handful of traits, how long you've had those traits, and how much they're affecting your life. This is a problem for a bunch of reasons. Firstly, your ability to manage your symptoms right now is not a reflection of how you've managed them in the past or will manage them in the future. For instance, I clean houses for a living, so I'm by myself all day. There's no need to mask. I'm moving around and that's activating my brain. On top of that, I'm listening to my music or learning from a podcast of my choosing. So either way, I'm getting a huge dopamine boost while I work. So of course, I'm not struggling the way I did when I was trying to work in an office. That's not going to work for my brain, so it made every part of my life more difficult. It's not a reflection of my neurodivergence, it's a reflection of whether I'm meeting my needs or not. The second problem with the diagnostic process is that most research is done on little white boys, and it's done by researchers that are neurotypical. They can't relate to our concerns, and the research they're often doing is through their lens, not ours. It's made even worse by the fact that the field of psychology is based on observable behaviors. This is made crystal clear when you look at the examples given for each symptom. Things like not being able to sit still, forgetting important dates, being late, or not being able to pay attention. Notice that these are all things that just annoy neurotypical people. You know what doesn't make that list? Things like rejection sensitivity, racing thoughts, and shame. Feeling rejected before you've even experienced the rejection. The inability to quiet your mind enough to think or sleep. And living under the crushing weight of shame and self-hatred are far worse symptoms than daydreaming and showing up late or interrupting conversations. Come on now. But you're not going to see those symptoms in the DSM-5. Why? Because these things are internal and nobody thought to ask us. And the same goes for autism too. The DSM-5 lists off things like rigidity and repetitive behaviors, all the things that neurotypicals would find different or weird. It doesn't mention overwhelm, sensory sensitivities, or anxiety, which is a huge part of the autistic experience. I mean, imagine a world where diagnosis was based off our actual struggles and not the ways that neurotypicals struggle to understand us. Whether you have ADHD or autism, you have extrasensory perception and a lack of neural pruning. Let me explain. Neurodivergents take in more sensory input. That means that we see, hear, taste, smell, and feel more than neurotypicals. And when I say feel, I mean both in terms of texture and emotion. We're dealing with so much more than we give ourselves time or permission to process. And that's why we're struggling. More than that, our brains hold on to more information. A typical brain is constantly clearing away loose ends, little bits of information that's either unclear or incomplete. See, the brain is full of millions of neurons. It's how it communicates with itself and the body. Neurons look a lot like trees. The trunk is called the axon, and at the top of it is the cell body. From the cell body, it branches out in all directions. These are called dendrites. And these dendrites are reaching outwards to form connections. Neural pruning is a lot like pruning a tree. You cut off the small twigs around the edges so the bigger, stronger branches can grow without stretching its resources too thin. A neurodivergent brain keeps more of those small branches. This means that it's using up more resources, and that's going to make our brains more tired. But it also means that our brains are a bit unruly because it's made more connections, and we have more loose ends, so we're open to more ideas. Our brains are extra, and we need to treat them as such. That means more time, more patience, and more kindness. The great thing about that is that whether you have autism or ADHD, when you get these needs met, you're going to have an extraordinary life. However, all that extra input, especially if you're not allowing for output, is going to cause overwhelm. This is 100% harder if you're trying to hide that extra behind a mask. Pretending that you're neurotypical is the fastest route to burnout. You cannot live like a normie, and I know that's scary to hear, but it's the truth. You are more. You were meant for more. And unless you're striving for more, no matter where you are on that journey, you're going to struggle. So you can either struggle to be happy or normal. The choice is yours. I can't make it for you. All I can do is tell you what choice I made and tell you why I'm happier for it. It would be unfair of me to not mention that it is not your fault if you're struggling. Almost every neurodivergent person I know has experienced trauma, and this greatly affects your ability to even recognize your needs, let alone setting your life up to meet those needs. We are gaslit by society from the time we're children to believe that our experiences aren't valid. We're told that we're lazy when we are working harder than anybody else, and we're told that we're broken for the way that we experience life. It's made clear to us that we are in the wrong, and it is our sole responsibility to figure out how to fit in. And the thing is, humans are social animals, and community is a must. But building community can be difficult, especially when you don't speak the same language. Neurodivergents are often described as socially awkward, or as the DSM-5 says, we have social communication deficits. But here's the thing, studies show that when neurodivergents and neurotypicals are in mixed groups, communication struggles happen on both sides. But if you have a group of just neurodivergents, their problem-solving skills outperform groups that are just neurotypical. That's because we don't rely on hierarchy, especially one that is built off who's the loudest or who's the most dominant. We covet information, and we would much rather be factually correct than right. So find other neurodivergents to build a community with. You probably have someone in your family or at least your friend group already, and don't worry about what flavor you are, because ADHDers and autistics are meant to be friends. This might come down to brain structure. Both ADHDers and autistics have smaller cerebellums. The cerebellum is in the oldest part of the brain, and it is responsible mainly for things like movement and coordination. But it's also responsible for things like memory and executive function. The biggest differences between ADHD and autism do seem to be in our behaviors. For instance, ADHDers have a drive for spontaneity and adventure. We need constant stimulation to feel at ease. Autistics, on the other hand, have a great desire for routine and repetition. They need stability to feel at ease. A lot of these things can be chalked up to a response to anxiety. Another brain structure difference is that autistics have a significantly larger amygdala. It's a part of our limbic system, so it's responsible for things like fight or flight. ADHDers experience anxiety as well, but for us, it's usually based on real concerns. It's hard not to be anxious about being late when you know you're almost always late, despite trying your best not to be. Whereas for an autistic person, that anxiety is actually coming from within. So the autistic need for routine and even repetition like stimming can be related back to their increased anxiety because of a larger amygdala. Another difference between ADHD and autism, for ADHDers, we have hyperfocuses. We can get intensely interested in one subject, but it tends to be fleeting and we move on to another subject within a couple of days or weeks. With autistics, that special interest can last their entire lives. Either way, we both prefer a deep dive into all the details of something rather than a shallow surface understanding. And this kind of thinking is called monotropism. Regardless of whether we have ADHD or autism, this can cause problems with transitioning from one task to another, and we can sometimes get so hyperfixated that we forget to do things like eat or sleep or even go to the bathroom. The difference between autism and ADHD is money to begin with, but that is made even more difficult when 70% of autistics meet the diagnostic criteria for ADHD, and up to 50% of ADHDers meet the diagnostic criteria for autism. This has created an entire new subgroup of neurodivergence, which we call ADHD, or Autism and ADHD smooshed together. A combination of the two presents its own unique challenges. Not only can you experience traits from either neurotype, but also those differences can compete with each other inside our own minds. Most ADHDers don't have a preference for routine or spontaneity. They require both at the exact same time. Mattia More, the host of ADHD Flourishing, describes it by saying, if most advice for neurodivergence doesn't work for you, then you might be ADHD. This sums it up quite well, but I'd like to add that one neurotype can mask the other neurotype. So your autism might cover up the fact that you have ADHD, or your ADHD may cover up the fact that you have autism. This doesn't mean that one cancels the other out. It just hides it, and both of those neurotypes are still competing inside your mind. For instance, you could spend days creating the perfect routine and then throw it out the window within a couple of days. It is really difficult to get your needs met when you have ADHD, no matter how hard you try. So when this happens, cut yourself some slack. Which brings us up to the 5 tips on how to live your most createfully divergent life. Number 1, give yourself grace. I know this can sound trite, but hear me out. Your brain is working overtime, even when you're asleep or doing nothing. You're exhausted. Acknowledge that. Full stop. I know you can't always control the responsibilities you have in your life, but you can control how much shit you give yourself when you make mistakes. Step 2, stop doing your D-work. D-work is anything that you really don't like doing and you're really not good at. Whatever it is, find ways to reduce that amount of work and up the amount of work you actually enjoy doing. Step 3, strengthen your cerebellum. Your brain doesn't separate itself from your body. It's all connected. So improving your physical balance through things like dance, martial arts, or yoga is going to help with your emotional regulation because that's a balancing act as well. Remember, the cerebellum controls movement and coordination, but also executive functions like emotional regulation. 2 birds, 1 stone. Which is my number 4 trick. Never do one thing when you can do many things. By this, I mean habit stacking. Don't try to just add a habit randomly throughout your day. Pin it to an already established habit. This creates a series of habits that get encoded into the brain as one task, which makes it both easier to remember and easier to take action because doing one thing is far less overwhelming than doing a bunch of things. So for instance, if you have a goal of drinking more water throughout the day, put your water bottle in front of your coffee maker before you go to bed. That way, when you wake up, you're not likely to forget the habit of drinking your morning coffee, so you'll immediately see the water bottle and you're more likely to drink more water. Number 5, develop a creative mindset. A creative mindset is so much more than a growth mindset, which is still a linear process. Your brain is divergent, which means to expand outwards in all directions. You are an idea generator, so you're far more likely to circle back. A neurodivergent life is never linear, and expecting linear growth is only going to disappoint you. We often see our career changes and our moves as a negative because we've been sold on the idea of career stability, but guess what? That doesn't exist anymore. You need career agility, and your neurodivergent brain is uniquely designed for just that. Thanks for watching. I'm Kristen. This is Createfully Divergent. Please comment, like, and share. And don't forget to subscribe because I post videos once a week and you're not going to want to miss them. Bye. So the research